Welcome into the first ever Bussy and Gordy show. It is Alec Bussy, joined by Carson Gordy. Guys, I am super excited to be doing this with one of my best friends in the industry. Guys, we are fired up about this show. Before we kind of explain everything, Carson, good morning. We are starting a college football podcast because we decided our FaceTime calls deserve to be heard by the public.
Yeah, and it's different now because I work in the news industry. So I cover tax rates that won't come into effect until 2026. I cover fire departments. So for me, I really miss covering sports. Like this is what I did in college. I covered Illinois basketball, covered Illinois football. To provide national takes now and just do a podcast, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. So a little bit about myself. I've been covering college football for 3 or 4 years. I've covered Illinois, K-State, who obviously had a really good season last year, won the Big 12, played in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. That one didn't go as well for the Cats, but overall it went pretty well last season for K-State. And now I'm covering Indiana. So back in the Big 10, back in the conference that I grew up watching and enjoying quite a bit. But college football is something that has grown into probably my biggest passion in life over the last couple of years. And I'm excited to be able to talk about it nationally with someone who I think knows the history of the sport as well as anyone I know. You want to quiz them on anything, you will be able to find an answer right off of the top of Carson's dome. And we're actually going to test that at the end of every episode by quizzing each other with one trivia question. So make sure to stay tuned with that. You can test your knowledge. That's how we're going to kind of wrap up every show. We're going to do 3 shows a week, or at least try to do 3 shows a week, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Wednesday show, that's obviously today's show. That's going to be a lot of just general discussion, news, recruiting trends, recruiting rankings, different things like that, national rankings, especially when that CFP poll comes out in the midpoint of this upcoming season. We may even dive in a little bit today into the AP poll, which was released on Monday. Friday, when the season's going on, we're going to pick the biggest games of the week. We're going to pick them against the spread. We're going to keep track of those, see who would be the best gambler if we were actually putting some real money on some of the biggest games in the sport. Probably going to be me, considering I've got some good experience and a good track record, at least picking the Big 12 from last season. Maybe we'll even do some super dogs, take the bit from college game.
Desmond Howard.
How you feel about that? Taking some super dogs.
Super dogs is fun. Let's do it.
We got
outright. It's 3 points. If you get the spread, it's 1 point.
And we'll keep track of it. We'll keep track of who's right and who's wrong and who wins. And maybe at the end of the year, we've got a punishment for the person who comes in last. How's that sound?
It sounds good.
Awesome.
I mean, I got to be better than Lee Corso and Desmond Howard.
That's true. Lee is my guy. Game day would not be the same without him, but there's some content issues now. It's just not as strong as it once was when we were kids.
I would just replace him with like Charles Barkley. Just get someone.
I wouldn't complain about that. I love Chuck.
That'd be awesome.
Chuck's never old. And then Sunday, we're going to recap the weekend and the results of the games and what it means. And obviously week 1, this upcoming season, which is just about 19 days away, I believe. We've got a lot of things that we can kind of discuss with some of the big games. So let's kind of dive into it. There's obviously been a ton of stuff going on in conference realignment. We're not going to talk about realignment, though. I'm kind of over realignment. I hope it's all kind of done and finished. And considering FSU wasn't able to let the ACC know yesterday that they plan to leave before the 2024 season, we don't really have to worry about it from the ACC's perspective, it seems like. So let's talk about the schools in the Big 10, the SEC, and the Big 12 that are hurt the most by conference realignment. Carson, I feel like this conversation usually focuses on the schools that are going into those leagues and who's going to have the most success, who's going to struggle the most in those conferences in their new home. And we've seen a lot of schools move and seen a lot of schools really struggle. Nebraska comes to mind. Maryland and Rutgers in the Big 10 obviously come to mind. Mizzou had some early success in the SEC. Going to back-to-back SEC title games in 13 and 14, but they've generally struggled and fallen off after some really successful years under Gary Pinkel and the SEC and the Big 12. The only school I feel like that has moved, that has had success, is Texas A&M. Their brand has definitely grown. Obviously, the Johnny Manziel doc really kind of talked about that last week when that was released. But we're going to spin this conversation. What schools in their current home do you think are going to see the biggest decrease in the level that they play at nationally or within the conference?
Well, let's start off with the Big 10. If you would have asked me in 2022 which teams get absolutely screwed by realignment, you would say a lot of the teams in the Big 10 West. Like you would look at Paul Chris's Wisconsin and you would say, like, you got to play Ohio State. You got to play Penn State. You got to play USC, UCLA. How do you compete in a shootout? You'd also talk about Nebraska. They would struggle. But what those programs did is that they rolled up their sleeves and realized, hey, we're actually pretty good brands. They get Luke Fickell, they get Matt Rule. So I actually think they're going to be fine during this realignment. I think another school that might struggle, and I know this kind of changes the conversation just a little bit, but I think USC is going to struggle. I think Lincoln Riley is not ready for Big Ten play. The trench play is not going to be able to hold up. The defense is going to struggle. Like when I line up Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan against those Trojans, I think they're going to punch them in the face.
Yeah, I think USC is going to struggle at first, but if they can start to recruit offensive and defensive line talent from the Midwest, I think that they'll be in a better position. There just isn't very much of that out west, especially in California. I think in the last 3 or 4 classes, there hasn't been a top 100 ranked offensive or defensive lineman in the state of California for USC to even recruit from their home state. So that presents unique challenges. I'm actually going to disagree with you. I think Wisconsin's going to be hurt by the additions to the Big Ten, because now I think I'm a believer in Luke Fickell. I'm a believer in that kind of direction overall, but I think of Wisconsin as, maybe the 3rd or 4th best program in the Big Ten over the last decade. And I think that that's probably going to fall at least a little bit. I mean, I expect Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State to still kind of maintain at the top of the league moving forward. And I think USC will kind of slide into that top group as well. But I think you're going to see teams like Wisconsin and see teams like Iowa, who are in that middle tier, really kind of fall off and struggle because of how much more difficult things are going to be. And, I think Oregon only makes things more difficult for them upcoming. I think Washington only makes things more difficult for programs like Wisconsin and Iowa upcoming. And Michigan State's a program that's been kind of inconsistent over the last decade, I would say. I mean, they've had really good highs. Think about the peak D'Antonio years, and then obviously 2021 under Mel Tucker. But, I think they're going to struggle with the new schools coming into the Big Ten. And I'm fascinated to see which of those middle tier Big Ten schools really kind of are able to maintain a middle tier level or fall off a little bit. And I think Wisconsin's one that could fall.
If we're comparing what Wisconsin was able to do in 2016, yes. But people that were following college football, we knew that Paul Chryst was going to bring this down to a 7-win, 6-win program because the offense was so outdated. So I think Wisconsin really, cut the damages. I mean, they're going to be a lot better with Luke Fickell than they were with Paul Chryst. You look at Iowa, that's nepotism. I mean, Brian Ferentz should not be the offensive coordinator of Iowa. I mean, they need to score 25 points a game or else he gets demoted. You know what's going to happen. Iowa's going to be playing like Western Michigan, and they're going to get 4 pick sixes, a blocked field goal for a touchdown, and that's going to be included in the point total. I mean, if you're a Hawkeye fan, you're pissed.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be like fired up about that like whole contract stipulation becoming public.
But one more thing about this whole, the losses, West Division teams that's going to rack up. Michigan State might struggle. I think the way that we view college football, it's like a 10-2 season's elite. Like you want to get to the 10-2.
Yeah.
There's too many good teams now. Like look at the SEC.
That's what I think it's going to happen with Wisconsin. I just think that there's now losses on their schedule that weren't there typically because they played in the Big Ten West.
I think it's for Penn State too. Like when you play Oregon and Washington, I mean, these are elite football programs potentially. So, and with the college football playoff becoming 12 teams, it's going to be acceptable to lose 2 to 3 games. Like I think the college football landscape is going more towards an NFL style. Like the New York Giants went 9-7 and they won the Super Bowl. It's a great year. I think in college football, you're going to tolerate a 9-3 season because Oklahoma, newsflash, isn't going to go 11-1 every year in the SEC.
No, they're probably not. But I think you also look at it from Oklahoma's perspective of it's certainly going to get harder for them. Like, I don't know if there's any program moving that it's going to get more difficult for or should be more expecting of a drop off in the level of success they've had from their previous conference to their new conference. I mean, the Big 12 is a Power 5 league or has been a Power 5 league, and it's just not on the same level as the SEC. I mean, go look at some of the scores of Oklahoma's CFP games. They got
that was a fun LSU Peach Bowl.
Boat raced in all of them except one, and that was Lincoln Riley's first one against Georgia in the Rose Bowl. So, like, I think Oklahoma is going to struggle, but at the same time, Oklahoma's been arguably the most consistent and best program in college football history, along with like Ohio State, USC. There really hasn't been a drop off except for a short period in the 90s. So I kind of think Oklahoma will figure it out, but I don't think they're going to be winning 11, 12 games a year.
But the difference was like in the Southwest Conference, who was their direct competitor? It was always Texas, right?
Well, they were in the Big Eight.
That's what I meant. The Big Eight. You know, it was Iowa State, it was Colorado,
Nebraska.
it was Nebraska during the Tom Osborne era. Like you could
State
usually name
Bill
one
Snyder
more
in the 90s.
program that was just as good. But like when you're comparing, they are with LSU, the best job in America. You know, they're with Florida with the right head coach. They're lethal. You got Georgia, the Death Star. You got Nick Saban, the Godfather. This is really going to be difficult, and Brett Venables is going to have to step it up.
I think if you want to talk about schools in the SEC, they're going to be hurt the most by it. I think,
Texas
A&M.
Texas A&M.
I think A&M's hurt by it, but I think the school that hurt the most by it is Auburn. Auburn to me has been like very inconsistent as a program in our lives, and they lack a lot of alignment, I guess you could say. I mean, they've won a national championship, they played for another one, but they've really kind of struggled to keep that going. I think Auburn's really going to be hurt by it, and no matter what you think of Hugh Freeze, the guy, he's probably known as a pretty good football coach at this point. Yeah. But I think Auburn is going to struggle in this. And you also look at it from the perspective of what the SEC's future scheduling model is going to look like. I'm assuming they're going to eventually go to 9 games, or they go to some sort of model like the flex protect thing that the Big Ten is doing, if they can put their pride aside and admit that what the Big Ten released was a good model. Auburn's going to have to play Georgia and Alabama every year. Like, that sucks for Auburn. So I think Auburn is a school that I would pick to kind of fall off and really struggle in their new home or in their current home.
They're going to be the dangerous 9-4 program. And every once in a while, they get Cam Newton. Every once in a while, they get a kick 6 and a Hail Mary for 75 yards. I think they're going to be the exact same. I think everyone in the SEC, I mean, this is crazy. I like to brag about the Big Ten getting a bunch of brands and getting the great TV revenue. But you go down that SEC lineup, I'm like, holy
I think the SEC 16 team lineup is better than the Big Ten's 18 team lineup.
I'm sorry. Like, Rutgers is not as good as Mississippi State. I mean, it just, the difference is insane. And especially if Sark kicks it off in Texas. I mean, this is blue blood galore.
It is. And I think that that's what makes the SEC really exciting to think about in the future. And you talk about like the media rights distributions and everything, right? Like, I don't think it matters too much to SEC. Like, if they wanted to expand it to 18, they very well could. I just don't think they have an interest in doing it. Greg Sankey has said as much. And I think he wants to figure out if 16 works for them before even considering going to 18. And it also seems like if the SEC does expand again, it's going to be to new markets and new states that they're not currently in, like Florida State or South Carolina. I think everyone kind of thinks that they just make a lot of sense in the SEC, but it seems like the SEC kind of wants to expand territory. If they expand again, we'll see if that happens. That seems like it's a couple years down the road. But another school in the SEC that I think is going to be hurt by Texas and Oklahoma joining the conference. You said Texas A&M. I agree with that one a lot. I think that might be the singular best answer, considering Texas has always kind of viewed them as like little brother. And Texas has really dominated that rivalry. And I think A&M's really been able to use the 3 letters across their chest, meaning more, pun intended there, when directly recruiting against Texas for the last decade. And I think Texas is going to have more success directly recruiting against A&M now that they're both in the SEC again, because quite frankly, kids want to play in the SEC. Kids want to play in the best conference, and it prepares you.
You want to go to the NFL.
Yeah, and the SEC does that, and that's something that Texas A&M had the best trump card against Texas, a program that they recruit against a ton. So I think A&M is maybe the best answer, like you said, for who's going to struggle the most. But I also think that A&M is a program that, like, I just can't figure out why they haven't been better historically.
I think just a little bit, we got tricked by Jimbo Fisher. I mean, Jimbo Fisher was known as the great head coach. I mean, LSU offered him $130 million to be their head coach, but he loved his ranch in Texas. So he stayed put. You take out the Jameis Winston years, he's a 9-4 football coach. And we talked about it last year. Remember, there was a great profile. The offense is going to be a struggle for Jimbo Fisher, and we'll see if he works well with Bobby Petrino. But if that doesn't, I think A&M knows The Texas Longhorns are just 10 yards away. They're coming. Oklahoma, the Steady Eddie program, they're coming. They're not going to be messing around. And I think with those resources, with the 3 letters across the chest, with the avid fan support, even being a underachieving program, they still win 8-9 games. They can get a coach in the mold of a Dan Lanning. I mean, they're going to be fine. They just haven't had the right head coach. Nobody mistakes Kevin Sumlin as a great head coach.
No, not particularly.
No, they've hired the wrong guys.
I think Kentucky's another school that's currently in the SEC that's going to be hurt by it a lot when you think about the SEC East and how down it's been. But I'm a big believer in Stoops. I think Stoops is a good head coach, and he's made Kentucky a really good program. And I'm high on them this year with Devin Leary at quarterback, and it's kind of returning to some of the old ways that were successful there. But, yeah, I think Kentucky's going to struggle because they don't get to feast on playing the SEC East every year. Now, they're probably going to get some favorable protected rivals. They do the 3-6-6 model. Like, they're probably going to get, I would assume, Tennessee. Maybe they get, like, Vandy in Georgia.
Oh, they're getting Vanderbilt.
They might get Vandy. They might get Mizzou. I mean, they could theoretically get South Carolina as well.
Is it Mississippi State, their protected rival on the West? No, it's Texas A&M. No, yeah, I think it's Mississippi State. They got some weird protected rival in the West, but yeah.
Well, the problem with the 3-6-6 model is that it just doesn't work. You have to manufacture rivalry games, right? And that's just unfortunate. That's just like how it kind of goes. But we'll see if the SEC even expands to a 9-game conference schedule. I mean, they still haven't announced or a plan to do that yet. So that's all kind of unknown.
I mean, can you ever really imagine Vanderbilt getting a winning record in the Big Ten? Like, I just can't.
Not really. But I can't.
No, not in the Big Ten, in the SEC.
No, not really. I mean, I think Clark Lee's doing a good job. Like, they won 5 games last year. They beat Florida. They beat Kentucky. Like, they had a good year. I would take their over this year.
I think Mississippi State's a program that's going to struggle. I mean,
yeah, they always struggle.
It's going to be worse.
I think Ole Miss is a program that could fall off.
And I think we started seeing that at the end of last year.
But they did that the year before, too.
They're just not as good. I thought Hugh Freeze was great, but there's a reason why he was great. He had some shady recruiting reasons that got top talent.
Well, recruiting reasons that are basically legal now.
Yeah, no, of course. But if you're Lane Kiffin, you should pack up your bags and go to Auburn. And obviously he was interested. He tried to negotiate, and then he stayed at Ole Miss. But no, the SEC is crazy, dude. I mean, it's going to be the most competitive conference.
It's so deep, and it's just so much fun to think about the helmet matchups that are happening in the SEC. And I was talking about this with a friend, actually. You think about some of the helmet games that are coming in the Big Ten. They don't really feel like conference games. Like Ohio State, USC doesn't really feel like a conference game. Michigan, Washington doesn't feel like a conference game. But like Texas, LSU, that kind of feels like a conference game.
Guess what?
Or like Oklahoma, Arkansas. Like that kind of feels like a little bit like a conference game. Maybe it's because those states border, but I don't know. It just kind of feels right, I guess.
That's exactly why it makes sense. It's geography. Conferences were built on regional relationships. The Big Ten used to be 6 states all touching each other? I mean, the SEC knows what they're doing. Like they are sacrificing a little bit of money to have integrity. And it's going to be a really, really good conference. Hey, don't get me wrong. Watching USC play in the Big House in the snow in November, that's must-watch television. But when I have to turn on the TV and see Washington play Rutgers in men's basketball, I'm going to be like, what the hell? Like, it's not the Big Ten.
No, it doesn't feel like the Big Ten. Yeah. And generally speaking, I think what's happened with conference realignment in the last couple of years is generally horrible for the sport as a whole. But, I mean, it's hard to not get excited about the future games that we're going to get every Saturday.
Yeah, just real quick, it's kind of like twofold, right? And it's kind of bittersweet. You're getting the funding that secures money for the Olympic sports, for lacrosse, for dive, but the logistics of it could be crazy for the Big Ten, and that's something that Josh Whitman at Illinois and every athletic director had to kind of balance. And when you're bringing in this much money, I mean, you are securing non-revenue sports. So, it's bittersweet. Hey, by the way, let's talk about the Big 12.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a crazy conference.
So I think the Big 12 is actually the most difficult conference to like circle which program is hurt the most by realignment in its current standing because they're all the same program as far as I'm concerned.
Now I look at it. Who is the top dog?
I don't know, and I think that's why it's going to be so much fun to watch every year.
I think Utah is gonna be really good.
I do too.
I think Utah's gonna pop off. Hey, your boy at Arizona State has an
Kenny
opportunity
Dillingham.
to make a playoff.
I'm big on Kenny Dillingham. He gets that job. He's from that area. He grew up in Scottsdale, Tempe area. He gets it. He's talked a ton about quote unquote activating the valley in recruitment. And there's a ton of players in that state that are great skill position talent, especially at quarterback and receiver, defensive back. Bijan Robinson is from Arizona, and he famously, I don't think, was ever seriously considering Arizona State or Arizona. That's a problem. I don't think that that's going to continue to be a thing with Jed Fish, who just secured a 5-star edge rusher in the 2024 class, or Kenny Dillingham at ASU. I'm high on both of those programs kind of climbing a little bit in the Big 12. I think Jed Fish has done a good job. They obviously struggled a ton at the end of the Kevin Sumlin era. I think they lost like 16 games in a row at one point. Jed Fish has them improving. I think Jaden DeLaura this season in the Pac-12 is going to have a good year, not being talked about enough as a quarterback and a loaded conference of QBs. But I agree with you. I think Utah is going to have a lot of success in the future Big 12. If there's a program I think might struggle that is currently in the Big 12 to maintain a similar level of play, I'm going to go Oklahoma State. And I know that that's kind of an interesting answer. Mike Gundy's obviously won 7 games every single year he's been the head coach there. But I just kind of get some bad vibes coming out of that program, coming out of Stillwater. They had a ton of kids enter the portal after the season. They got killed at the end of the year against teams that they probably should have played more competitive games against, or maybe even won. And I just wonder if he is able to adapt to the new level of college football with NIL, the transfer portal, everything else. Because I feel like every single time Mike Gundy gets up in front of a microphone, he just complains about NIL and the transfer portal. And is this what we really want? Yeah, I mean, that was like 10 years ago, but yeah.
It was like 15. No, you're right. It kind of gives you Dabo Swinney vibes. However, he doesn't have the recruiting advantages of being in South Carolina, and he doesn't have the talent. I mean, Oklahoma State has kind of been frustrating. There's been years where you think this team's going to make the college football playoff, and then they lose to Iowa State in double overtime. You know, they're an inch away of making the playoff, but they get stopped by Baylor. And eventually,
that was a hell of a game, by the way.
That was one of the best Big 12 title games.
Big 12 title games are doing it right the last 2 years.
Well, I've always thought the Big 12 was a really fun conference. Like it's always been entertaining. It just kind of feels like JV compared to the SEC, but it's still fun. But no, Oklahoma State might struggle. Like I don't disagree with that. I think Matt Campbell at Iowa State is going to struggle because Arizona State, no one ever understands why they've always been bad in football. And now they got a 32-year-old head coach who knows how to recruit. They have new life. They have stability. That is the program to watch out for. Well, and we all know Colorado. Come on, please be good.
Yeah. Colorado is an interesting one. They get a little preview of what Big 12 life is going to be like in week 1 this year, traveling down to TCU.
They're going to get punched in the mouth.
Probably
get dominated by TCU. And then
I do think that the pendulum has swung really far in the wrong direction for Colorado over the last couple weeks, couple months. Like, I don't think that people expected them to ever be good, but I feel like that they're it's now swung to the point where it's like they're gonna get smoked in every game. It's like, they have talent, like there's just no depth.
And dude, that's an issue. And when you're playing TCU, the defending runner-ups in college football, when you play Nebraska the next week, I'm sorry, that's gonna be a tough game. I'm taking Matt Rule. I'm taking Sims. They're going to get a lot of exposure because Big Noon kickoff is going to each of those 2 games. What if they lose 35-0 and 35-7 in back-to-back weeks? What is Deion Sanders going to say? Can Deion Sanders handle losing? He's never lost in his life. He's the great Florida State quarterback. He goes to Jackson State and wins right away. Somehow he's good at baseball. Can he handle adversity? I think that's a good question.
A successful first season for Colorado is winning 3 to 4 games, winning 4 games.
Yeah, they need to.
They lost games last year by an average of about 30 points a game. If they win 4 games this season, it'll be a good first season for Deion at Colorado.
People like his son at quarterback.
Shador's really good. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. Now, there's no one behind him, so if he gets hurt, I don't know who's going to play quarterback there. But
that's so many programs. If your quarterback gets hurt, you're screwed. If Tommy DeVito was out last year for Illinois, they don't make a bowl game. Sorry,
no, you're probably right there. All right, so you talked about the week 1 game between Colorado and TCU. That's one that I'm excited for this upcoming season. You're good. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know what the hell happened. Hang on.
Carson has someone knocking on the door.
Give me that.
This is a nice little interruption in the first show. I like it. I'll keep this going. I'll keep the conversation going as Carson checks what's at the door. And I'm going to keep this in the post cut because I find it to be hilarious that this happened in the first episode. So Carson talked about the Colorado TCU game in week 1. I think that's one that a lot of people are just naturally really excited for this upcoming season.
I have some people in pest control. I guess it happens once every couple months. They're spraying my bathroom.
Oh, nice. Got any bugs in there?
That's my guy right there. That scared the crap out of me. I thought I forgot to pay my gas bill or something.
That would have been bad.
Wait, so what were we talking about?
Okay, so you talked about how there's a lot of excitement for that TCU game, Colorado week 1, Colorado, Nebraska week 2.
Yes.
We're going to talk about our 5 most exciting games that we're looking forward to the 2023 season. I've got a list of 5 and a long list of games that like quote unquote just missed the cut, but there's like 15 games I think in the just missed the cut category. I'm excited about seeing your list here. I'm sure there's going to be some natural overlap in our opinions, and that's totally fine. But Carson, I'll let you go first. We're going to count these down from 5 to 1. We can alternate for them. What's your top 5? Yeah, top 5. What's your number 5 most excited for game this year?
Ohio State, Notre Dame.
Interesting.
I'm a big tradition guy, and I think that Ohio State going down to Notre Dame is going to be a really good test. We saw last year Notre Dame scared them. Notre Dame was up 10-7 pretty late in that game. I think Notre Dame is going to be pretty good. When you have a guy like Sam Hartman that's going to be able to keep those defenses honest. I mean, this is the best Notre Dame quarterback that I can remember probably since Brady Quinn. Like when they made that national title game with Everett Golson, I mean, he's not a good quarterback. Tommy Rees himself was not a good quarterback. Hartman is going to elevate this Notre Dame offense, and I think they're fun. I didn't like Notre Dame when Brian Kelly was there. He's just not likable. How do you not like Marcus Freeman in what he's doing for this program? So I think it's a good game. I think it's a potential trap game for Ohio State. It's got tradition. I'm in.
Yeah, that actually is not on my list. It's actually not also in my just missed the cut list. I think it's just that way because I expect Ohio State to win in a fairly convincing manner. Now, maybe that game's like week 4, so I think that they've probably figured out any quarterback kinks at that point. We still don't know who Ohio State's starting quarterback is going to be between Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. We'll see how that ends up shaking out. I think it'll end up being Kyle McCord personally, but that actually is not on my list. Talk about helmet games. Like, yeah, that's definitely probably up there for a lot of people. For me, it's just not, just because I expect Ohio State to win. Or my number 5, I'm going to start out in the Pac-12. Number 6, USC going to number 14, Utah. Those are obviously the preseason APU rankings. I wanted to put a few Pac-12 games on here, and there's a lot in my just missed the cut list. I put USC at Utah number 5 there because I think that game, obviously we know what happened last year between those two schools, Utah beating them twice and really just absolutely punching USC in the mouth and just physically annihilating them in each game. Now, obviously, USC played them really close out in Salt Lake City, I believe, in the midpoint of last season. But I'm excited to see if Cam Rising is fully healthy at that point, coming off of his ACL injury in the Rose Bowl. We should know if he's ready to go at that point. And as far as I'm concerned, like Utah's won the Pac-12 the last 2 years. That league kind of belongs to them until someone else takes it from them. And I know that they're the 3rd or 4th highest ranked preseason team in the Pac-12 behind USC, Oregon, and Washington. I believe they're ranked ahead of or behind Oregon. Oregon State's also ranked out there. So I put that one number 5, but I could have put USC, Oregon, USC, Washington. I could have put any combination games there, but I put that one because of what happened last year.
Dude, the past 2 years, look what they did at Oregon. They won 38-7 and 38-10 in the span of 3 weeks with the Pac-12.
Yep.
Everyone was like Caleb Williams, Heisman, college football playoff. But that USC defense could not handle a rushing attack from Utah. I think you're right. I think Utah is being slept on as being serious Pac-12 title contenders. I mean, dude, they're legit. You bring back, Cam, this is going to be an elite team.
Yeah, and their defense is going to be really good again. And I'm just high on that program, and I don't feel like anyone talks about them enough because they don't have the sex appeal, the brand name of USC, Oregon, Washington this year. And I mean, even last year, I felt like UCLA got more pub nationally until late in the season when they kind of started to lose a couple games, especially after they lost to USC. All right, I'll go 4, and then I'll let you go here, number 4. Week 1, LSU against Florida State.
Thanks for stealing my game.
Oh, is this your number 4 as well?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So this will be a good conversation.
Yeah.
So this was maybe the best game played last season, and it was week 1. It was an incredible football game. I'm fired up for it this year, and I think that there's some legitimate playoff stakes in this game, actually.
We're going to find – yeah, I'm sorry.
Because Florida State has Clemson, I think, week 3. Obviously, LSU has Bama later in the season. Whoever loses this game is already flirting with missing a playoff opportunity if they lose another one. So I love the playoff implications in week 1. I think that that's super fun. And also, these are two teams that I'm pretty high on entering the season. I think both could legitimately make the playoff, win their respective conference. And there's a lot that would need to happen for each of those schools to do that. But I'm fired up for this game in week 1. And I love that it's a Sunday night.
Oh, yeah, like last year. Well, that was a crazy game, right? The blocked extra point. But no, I look at this game, and it's not Alabama, Ohio State. It's not Georgia taking on proven Ohio State. These are two programs that are starting to get hyped up a little bit, and they have to prove it this year. Would you really be surprised if Florida State started 2-2? No,
because of what their schedule looks like in the first month.
I think Clemson's actually pretty good at football, defending ACC champs. Nobody's talking about them as much as they used to. So, no, this is a phenomenal game. And Brian Kelly, expectations, great. You won the division at 10-4. But are you going to take that next step? You left Notre Dame to win national championships. You got to beat Florida State. I like Florida State, but LSU should win this game.
I think LSU should win the game. It is being played at Camping World Stadium, I believe, and last year it was in New Orleans. So it's not necessarily going to be a home game for LSU like it was last year, and that maybe raises some concern. And, I mean, you're looking at 2 potential Heisman candidates at quarterback, too, with Jordan Travis at Florida State and obviously Jane Daniels at LSU. So I'm fired up for that one. I think that's an awesome way to kind of kickstart the season in week 1 and really kind of get us ready for week 2 and week 3 after that. All right, Carson, what's your number 3?
Number 3. Let me get it. I like Ohio State, Penn State. I mean, Penn State, this is a program that people think can maybe crash into the playoff. I mean, they got a great running back. And when do you ever hear, you lose your quarterback that won a Rose Bowl MVP and you're supposed to improve? People are like, they upgraded at quarterback with a freshman Drew Olar. I mean, Sean Clifford, hate to say it, didn't really have a lot of big wins. James Franklin even went on record and said the one thing that's holding us back from winning national championships is that elite quarterback play. So I like Penn State. This was a top 10 defense. This was a program with 2 great running backs. Drew Olar is dynamic. So Penn State taking on Ohio State, this is a close game every single year. If they want to be taken seriously, they have to go into the shoe and compete well and maybe even win.
So follow-up point. You said the biggest thing keeping Penn State from competing for national championships is elite quarterback play. Agree with that. Drew Allar is a 5-star quarterback, and I'm fired up for him to be the starting quarterback. You know what James Franklin's record is against top 10 teams at Penn State?
Well, it's not good. So he's beat Ohio State once on a blocked field goal. How many times has he beat Michigan? Twice. How many top 5 wins? I don't know. Does Wisconsin count in the Big Ten title game?
I don't know. I just know that their overall record is 3-20.
Yeah.
That's horrible. That's so bad. Because they've had really good teams.
I'm not a James Franklin guy.
This game is in my just missed category. I'm super high on Penn State entering the year. I think that they're going to have potentially the best defense in the Big Ten this year. I think that should help them playing against Penn State or playing against Ohio State. They've got to be better on the line of scrimmage, especially on the defensive line. That's where they really struggled last year against Michigan. Everyone remembers they gave up 418 rushing yards to the Wolverines last year. What's interesting about the Penn State situation is they always play Ohio State close, but they get smashed by Michigan whenever they play them in the Big House. Well, now this year, Michigan has to go to Happy Valley. So if Penn State can get one of those, which I think is conceivable, and I don't think it's fair to expect them to win both because that's just asking a lot. But if they can get one of them, they could maybe go to the Big Ten title game. And I mean, whoever comes out of the East is going to win the Big Ten. Okay, so my number 3, LSU at Alabama. This is one of my favorite games every single season. I would argue that this is turning into like maybe the biggest must-watch game of our lives. We're both in our early 20s. Like consistently, this has probably been the one conference game every single year that people are most excited about in terms of two really good teams. The way this game ended last year, last play of the game, LSU wins on a 2-point conversion. Ballsy call by Brian Kelly works on his favor, and it basically is the reason why Bama misses a playoff and misses the SEC title game. So I've got this one number 3, and part of the reason is Bama was picked to win the SEC West by I think like 1 point or like 1 vote over LSU. I really have no idea how I had a vote for that, how I would decipher those two teams. I think I trust LSU's top line talent a little bit more. We talked about Jaden Daniels at quarterback, Mason Smith is returning at defensive tackle. Harold Perkins is maybe the best defensive player in college football this year. I think LSU's top line talent is great. I just don't know if they have the depth like Alabama does. When you look at Bama's blue chip ratio being like over 90%, I kind of think that they figure out the quarterback thing. They have like 3 guys who I feel like are all capable enough of being good enough, and I think they're going to run the ball really well.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's hard for me to not put this game on there when it's 2 preseason top 5 teams, and the game's in T-Town. So I'm fired up for that one.
I got concerns about the quarterback play. And here, I'll just give you the number 2 because this is going to kind of lead into the LSU Alabama conversation. My number 2 game is Texas Alabama.
Oh, me too.
That's your number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a great game. Call me crazy. Would it really be shocking if Quinn went into Tuscaloosa and outscored Buckner?
No. I don't know. I don't know if he's actually going to start for Bama, though. I don't think anyone knows who's going to start for Bama.
I'm telling you, if Quinn plays last year healthy, Texas wins that football game. They settled for 4 field goals in the red zone. They lost 20.
I mean, they might win that game if Hudson Card doesn't sprain his ankle.
That is a great game. I'm high on Texas. Texas, for the first time, is finally the Big 12 favorite. I want Steve Sarkisian to save his job. I'm taking Texas to defeat Alabama.
Wow, that's bold.
I'm taking it.
That's bold.
I think they're 8-point favorites.
Okay. I'm also high on Texas. Obviously, for people who are tuned into our group chats, I'm high on Texas. I don't think that they beat Bama, but I am fired up for this game. I think that Texas does cover this. I think that being in week 2, that's huge for Texas and their opportunity to go in there if Bama does struggle at the quarterback spot. And if their offensive line isn't as good as it's been in the past, their offensive line wasn't as good as it usually was last season. I'm high on Texas. The receiving core is nuts this year. Everyone knows about A.D. Mitchell transferring there. Everyone knows about Xavier Worthy returning for the Longhorns. But don't forget Isaiah Nair. He didn't play last year because he tore his ACL. He's super fast, transfers from Wyoming. He's going to be really good. Jordan Winnington returns. Jatavian Sanders returns at tight end. Their pass catching core is about as good as it's going to get behind only Ohio State. I'm high on Texas. I think that their offensive line is going to be good. They have the best defensive player in the Big 12. If they can go into Bama and beat them, and I'm not saying it would shock me. I don't think it would. I think that they're going to be good. I just don't think I feel comfortable enough picking them to go 12-0, 11-1. I think they go 10-2. I think they lose to Bama, pound Oklahoma, and lose to some random Big 12 team.
If they beat Alabama, I'm looking at their schedule. They are losing at Baylor.
They'll do something stupid somewhere. And that's the biggest thing with this Texas team heading into this year is which game are you going to do your best to not screw up? Because I trust them to get up and play at Bama. They're going to play that game close unless the environment is just too much for them, which I don't think it's going to be. Like, they always get up for big games. They've always done that in the last decade when they've struggled to be as good as Texas should be.
You
It's
remember
they've
they were
lost stupid games like at Texas Tech and against Oklahoma State last year.
they were back. They beat Notre Dame in 2016.
Okay, Joe
2 weeks
Test.
2 weeks later, they lose to Cal. They beat Oklahoma in the regular season, then they drop a game to Iowa State. I mean, this is
Yes.
frustrating, and it's not normal. And I can't just blame Steve Sarkisian because Charlie Strong did this. Tom Herman did this.
The
This is a
difference
cultural problem.
it is, but the difference in why I'm higher on this Texas program currently now than I was previously is because of the way that he's recruited and developed on the offensive line. Since 2010, do you know how many draft picks Alabama's had on the offensive line? Or excuse me,
Wilson
Texas has
football,
had
right?
on the offensive line?
With Texas, I don't know.
One or two.
That
Two.
sounds
They've
good.
had two, and one of them was developed by Sark. So, like, they just haven't developed offensive line talent very well. Kelvin Banks might be an All-American this year at tackle as a true sophomore. He was a former 5-star. So that kind of just shows, like, the development curve that has improved at Texas at important positions. Jalen Ford is the best defensive player in the Big 12. Yeah, I'm high on Texas. I think that the way that they've struggled in the past is because they haven't recruited well on the line of scrimmage and they haven't developed well on the line of scrimmage. And the way things have changed there, it seems like that's changed. And that's why I'm high on Texas heading into 2023 is I think that their skill position talent is still really, really good. I know they lost Bijan. I know they lost Roshan. I think they're going to figure out the running situation. They've got Cedric Baxter, who's the top-ranked running back in the 2023 class, who's probably going to get carries. I think Quinn is going to be pretty good. I think people have swung too far in him not being good for whatever reason. I think it's because of the brand and the name and everything else. I think he's going to be really good. I wouldn't be shocked if he turns into an NFL draft pick after the season. And if Quinn's not good, throw Malik Murphy in there. He's another former top 100 blue chip quarterback, I believe. And if Malik Murphy's not good, the most significant recruiting win in the history of the sport is the third string quarterback.
Who?
So
His name?
Arch Manning.
Oh, yes, Arch.
So, like, I think that Texas, I buy Texas. I just don't want to go all in on Texas and be like, that's a team that's going to the playoff.
And here's another issue with the Texas program that kind of got underreported in the previous years. After Colt McCoy, who was their best quarterback until like 2018?
Sam Ellinger.
Like, dude, they were missing out on Andrew Luck. They were missing out on Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston wanted to be a Texas Longhorn, and they said no.
Johnny Manziel wanted to be a Texas Longhorn.
Exactly. So look what they're doing with the quarterback play. You got Arch Manning. That is football mecca. Like that is royalty. You got Quinn. That's one of the best recruits of all time. People like to freak out about Quinn, but he's a victim of his own success. He played great against Alabama. He gets hurt. And people forget that was his freshman year. This was the first time
it was his freshman year, yeah.
He was getting action. So they're going to be good. My question for you is, what does Texas have to go? Like, what is their record for people to cool off on Sark?
I think that it swung too far for them, and people saying like if they don't win the Big 12, it's a failure, it's a disappointment. I disagree with that. I think if they go 10-2 and play for a Big 12 title game, it should be viewed as a success.
I agree.
And I think that is notable momentum heading into the SEC. And if they go 10-2, that probably means that Quinn had a really good year. He's probably looking at an NFL draft pick. Their offensive and defensive line talent is going to return again because most of it's sophomores and juniors. And I don't think you want to go into the SEC having to be under a first-year head coach again. So I think 10-2, and they've got a good opportunity to win a Big 12 title. Am I picking them to do it? I don't know. We are going to do our conference picks at another episode, so stay tuned for that. But I think that Texas should play for a Big 12 title. I don't know if I should say that they should win it, though.
They should win. Realistically, but
They should win. But
now, if they go 10-3, let's say they lose a close game to Oklahoma, Texas Tech, TCU, whatever, you feel confident. What you don't want to see is the road loss to Iowa State. You don't want to see the regular season loss to Texas Tech. Win the games you're supposed to, and Steve's going to get some momentum into SEC play. Having Arch Manning in your back pocket, if Quinn leaves, it's like, okay, we have Peyton Manning and Eli Manning's nephew.
Or Malik Murphy.
Or Malik Murphy. I mean, they are stacked in the quarterback position. Dude, they had Hudson Card last year as a backup. That's a great backup. So
Yes,
no,
it is.
they're
And
good.
yeah, and the one thing that people cannot say about Sark is that he struggled to develop quarterbacks. He's
No, that's
always
what.
had good quarterback play.
No,
And now you're seeing that in the way they've recruited, and I kind of trust him to develop good quarterbacks.
you always talk about it. Nick Saban thought he could have taken over Alabama.
He was the man in waiting, according to a book I read.
It's crazy.
It's
But
not.
hey, we all know the top game.
It's got to be, right?
It's called the game for a reason. It's Ohio State, Michigan. And I am so sick of these people calling for Ryan Day's head. I am sick of these people that think that JJ McCarthy is going to be a top 15 pick. If Ohio State's secondary just has a normal game, if they don't fall on their face, they win. JJ McCarthy went 12 of 24 against Ohio State for like 300 yards. He didn't make one single throw that was a 50-50 ball. I mean, Michigan, they're good, but when they play Georgia, they lose by 23. When Ohio State plays Georgia, they lose by a single point and probably should have won the game. I think Ohio State goes up to the big house. I think Marvin Harrison's too much. I think the spread offense is too much. I think Jim Knowles' defense is going to improve, and they're going to outscore the Wolverines.
Yeah, this is my number one game as well. I think it's hard for it to not be, considering all the sideline stories of it. Obviously, you talked about the Ryan Day side of it and the Ohio State side of it. I'm going to talk about the Michigan side of it. It is their game right now. They won the last two. They've won the Big Ten in back-to-back years. They probably feel like it's their conference. I mean, they were picked to win the Big Ten this year. They were not picked to win the Big Ten last year. They're higher ranked than Ohio State entering the preseason. So I think Michigan probably feels like it's a game that they are expected to win this season, especially with it being at the big house. And I would agree with that. I think Michigan is probably expected to win, at least entering the regular season. I'm going to go this a little bit further. This obviously is a big game because of it being the game. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last time Jim Harbaugh coaches in this game.
In the NFL.
I think he might. I think that this NCAA stuff hanging over his head is fairly significant. We know he's flirted with the NFL each of the last 2 years. This negotiated settlement between the Committee of Infractions and Michigan for the impermissible contact during the COVID recruiting period is now not just going to be a 4-game suspension at the start of the season, which likely means that I think the NCAA wants it to be longer than 4 games. And I think that Jim Harbaugh is probably, I wouldn't be surprised if Harbaugh has a really good year. They win the Big Ten again. They go to the playoff. Maybe they play for the national championship.
Lose to Texas.
And he says, you know what? Like, I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't feel like dealing with this BS from the NCAA. And I'm going to take an NFL job, be more prepared for it going into it, have a better expectation of, how to perform well in an interview. We've heard that he didn't do great in the interview with the Vikings. I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last game against Ohio State.
Dude, he just walked in and I guess it was like the most awkward conversation. He's like, all right, where's the contract? Where do I sign? And the Vikings are like, who the heck is this guy? He doesn't work for the NFL because he wants the power. He wants the personnel decisions.
All of that's true, but he wins. And that's what matters in the NFL more than anything.
Like the 49ers was great. I mean, he turned around Alex Smith. He turned around Colin Kaepernick. But he would need a pretty good situation. You would see the Cowboys job. You would see the Vikings job would have been perfect with him with Kirk Cousins. I think he's got a really bad reputation with NFL guys.
I mean, the Niners were basically like, hey, man, like, get out of here.
And he's the winningest coach, winning percentage-wise, because he's trying to tell the GM what to do. I mean, these are guys with high egos that want to do their job. Like, he's not going to mesh well with management. Why didn't he go this year? You know what I mean? Like, we hear this.
I think the Broncos showed significant interest in him, but then they had Sean Payton kind of fall into their lap, and, like, you're just going to hire Sean Payton. No. He won a Super Bowl, and he did it for longer in an organization that historically has not been very good.
Yeah. I don't know. With Jim Harbaugh, I got to believe it. I got to see it to believe it. I think he's going to be at Michigan for a while. I mean, he has the chance to become the next Bo Schembechler. Like, he can be here for 20 years, win 10, 9, 11 games a year, and he's going to go down as a legend.
I mean, he probably already is, considering he swung the power of the rivalry back.
What if they play during COVID in 2020?
I don't think he has a job anymore because I think they get absolutely destroyed, and I think people fire him after that.
I don't think he survives either. I think that's a really good
Because
point.
I think they get absolutely smashed in that 2020 game if they play. And reminder, if I remember correctly, Michigan had enough players for that game, and they just chose not to play.
They were done.
Does that sound right? Is that how that situation was?
Oh, they were fine. I mean, they canceled games against Maryland. They canceled games against Iowa, Ohio State. I mean, that Michigan team had to come back down and beat Rutgers in overtime. Like this was a struggling program. I mean, no one was expecting these past 2 years for Michigan to win 25 games.
No.
Harbaugh has turned around a minor miracle.
No, he definitely has. And I mean, again, like I think that they should be expected to win against Ohio State this year. I think that they should be expected to win the Big Ten this year. All that being said, if I had to pick one of those two teams to win the national championship, I would pick Ohio State because I think they have more talent. And I think they have the necessary talent to do it. And I've seen them come closer to doing it, and they don't screw around with Philly specials on the 1 yard line against TCU in the semifinal when you have the two-time reigning Joe Moore Award winning offensive line. And a running back who was a top 50 overall recruit and Donovan Edwards, who could probably just run backwards over the line of scrimmage at that point. But yeah, I think Michigan is deserving of being ranked ahead of Ohio State this year. I think they're deserving of being the Big Ten favorite entering the season. But if they're going to win a national championship and take the next step, they need to let JJ cook. Like JJ was a former 5-star. He's incredibly talented. I mean, I'm not as high on JJ as like other people are. I don't see him as a consensus like first round pick like others do because I just haven't seen him do it enough on the field. You talked about the way he played against Ohio State. Like I watched the Ohio State game as well as millions of other people, and I was like, the most impressive play he had was the option keeper at the goal line to get in for the touchdown run. Like I don't give you credit for hitting wide open receivers because of coverage bust. I just don't. Right. They need to let him cook. They need to let him play. They need to let him play to his talents. And if that means not giving the ball to Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as much this season, then so be it. Because I think by the end of the season, once you head into the Ohio State game, you're probably going to need to let him cook. And if you make it to the playoff again, and you're playing Georgia, you're probably going to need to let him cook. Because I don't think Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are going to run over Georgia's defensive line.
Harbaugh loves field goals. I mean, they kicked 5 against Michigan State. They kicked 4 against Illinois. He's always just been super vanilla on the offense. And fine, that's good against Maryland. Like, that's good against maybe even Wisconsin. But when you play these elite teams like Georgia, they are better at what you do. And Ohio State figured out that formula. Like, if you want to compete against Alabama and Georgia, you got to throw the ball around and score 40 points. But I got a hypothetical for you, just for fun. It's probably not going to happen. Let's say Michigan beats Ohio State in the regular season finale, but Ohio State still makes the playoff.
Like last year.
And then they knock off, let's just say, LSU in the semifinal. And they play Michigan for the national title. And let's just
I don't even want to contemplate that in my brain.
It almost happened last year. And
yeah, it did.
Let's say Michigan beats Ohio State twice in 1 year.
Then I think Ryan Day might lose his job.
Ryan Day, who just lost the national title game
and lost 4 in a row to Michigan, he might lose his job at that point. Or he might just be like, hey, I'm done. I'm going to the NFL to be an offensive coordinator or something.
His seat would be boiling.
And he might lose his job if they lost four straight to Ohio State or 4 straight to Michigan, including a national title game.
All right, just want to make sure.
Yeah. Hypothetically, I could see that being true. All right, we're gonna roll through some of the games I put in the just missed category real quick. Texas A&M at Miami. That's week 2. I think there's lots of coaching drama in that game. Whichever coach loses that game, I think is going to be having a pretty angry fan base behind him. I included Penn State at Michigan. You included Penn State at Ohio State. Similar reasons there. Clemson at Florida State, week 3. Talked about that one briefly. I think that one's going to be fun because it has impact on the ACC title race because the ACC got rid of divisions this year. So both those teams could conceivably play for the ACC title. Texas at Oklahoma, Red River, love it. I'm excited to see if Brent Venables has any sort of a semblance of a defense this season. I think that Texas will beat them. Nebraska at Colorado, talked about it a little bit. Alabama at Texas A&M. That's a fun one to me. Those two teams have played very close games last 2 years. A&M beat them, obviously, 2 years ago. Probably should have beat them in T-Town last year. We know A&M always plays Bama well. USC at Washington, I believe you talked about. USC at Oregon. And then UGA at Tennessee. I feel like it's bad to not have Georgia mentioned here at all, considering they've won back-to-back national titles. But they have a cupcake of a schedule because they had to cancel their game against Oklahoma because of the Sooners joining the SEC and the SEC East just being pretty down and their crossover games being favorable this year. So I felt like I had to put one Georgia game on there. So I threw Georgia at Tennessee. But if that game's anything like it was last year, I don't really think it's going to be close.
Doesn't it just seem inevitable that they win a national title? I'm taking Georgia. You don't think so?
I don't feel like it feels inevitable, no.
You think Ohio State can win it? Like, realistically,
I think that there's I think that they can. I think Bama can. I think LSU can. I mean, I think that those are for like 4 teams I conceivably could see. I mean, Michigan, I wouldn't pick Michigan to do it, but I think like if Michigan won it, I wouldn't be shocked.
If I put Georgia in the West Division, let's just say the past 3 years, do they have more losses? Like, how many more?
I mean,
do they still go pretty much
12? Because they would have beat Bama last year. They did beat the SEC West champion last year. And the 2021 team was by far the best team in the country.
Yeah.
So maybe they have 1 or 2 more. I mean, certainly their schedule is more difficult, but Georgia, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they win a 3rd straight. I mean, no one's done it since like the 1930s Gophers. So
yeah, good company with Minnesota and Army. Those are the only programs to win 3 straight titles.
It's just really hard to win 3 in a row. I mean, it's really hard to win 1, let alone 2, and then you try and do a 3rd. Like, that's just really hard to do.
If Marvin Harrison doesn't get a concussion, if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't get a concussion, they might not win it last year. I mean, it is really hard to win a national title, obviously.
Yes.
So, we'll see.
All right, Carson, let's get to trivia. A lot of people probably didn't know the last school to win 3 national champions in a row was Minnesota.
In Army.
In Army, sure. I didn't know that one. All right. You're probably going to get this right just because you're like a bank of knowledge and know a lot of these things.
You just jinxed it. But okay.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Who won the very first Heisman Trophy?
I honestly don't know.
Really? Oh, I thought you just like snap finger, get it right away.
Is it a Georgia Tech guy?
No, it's not. It's someone from the University of Chicago.
I'm usually a freak with this stuff. I don't know. Who is it?
Jay Burwanger, University of Chicago. He's a halfback. He got 43% of the possible points. That was back in 1935. He was a senior. He also went first overall in the draft.
First overall, okay.
I don't know the draft
because back then the NFL used to be extremely regional. Like if you played at Illinois, you're going to play for the Bears. Do you know what NFL team he played for?
Burwanger?
Yeah.
No, but I'll click on his page real quick and it'll come up probably. Hey,
I got a trivia question for you.
All right, you hit me.
In 2008, there was a bowl that tried to get BCS status. They brought down the BCS. They wined and dined them. They thought this could have been a major bowl game. It would have been in the likes of a Rose Bowl, a Sugar Bowl, etc. What bowl was that? And they almost got it.
Okay, so my guess here is going to be the Cotton Bowl because I believe it wasn't a BCS bowl, which I always thought was kind of weird and didn't really make sense to me because it's the Cotton Bowl. But I'm going to assume that's just not correct.
It's the Citrus Bowl.
Well, that kind of makes some sense. I probably could
the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. We got Disney World. We got great SEC and Big Ten games every year. And do you know the Citrus Bowl almost got the national title in the 1980s?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. During the Miami-Penn State national title game in 1985, there was because Penn State wasn't in the Big Ten yet. Miami was independent. So there was a way that number 1 and number 2 were going to play in the Citrus Bowl instead of the Fiesta Bowl, instead of the Sugar Bowl. So the Citrus Bowl has had great history, and they almost got that BCS Bowl. I think that would have been weird because the Orange Bowl is already in Florida. But, they almost got it in 2010.
All right, that was some good trivia. I thought mine was a better question than yours, but
yours is better, but
yours is like a weird factoid, I feel like.
Yeah.
Weird factoid. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for our first episode. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll tune in again later in the week for another episode because we're going to talk about some more interesting, fun things, hopefully that you find to be appealing to listen to. Again, thanks for listening. If you guys could leave us a like, a rate, a comment, whatever the order of that stuff is supposed to be, I'd appreciate it.
I don't know, it's Carson-Gordy, if you guys like this.
Yeah, it's a subscription or whatever the order of things that like YouTubers and regular podcast hosts kind of have like down pat on what they're going to say. But anyway, thanks for listening. We will be back later in the week. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.